Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the LRC show. We're glad to be with you again. A lot has happened this week, although it might not seem like it from the outside. Bunch of political nerds like us. Last week was a veritable fertile field of things to address. So we're going to get to some of those things tonight. We're going to talk about historical revisionism. Changing the past, changing the narrative of the past, where it's been done, what it's about, whether it's good or bad, that kind of stuff. We're also going to get back to the fan favorite bullshit philosophy with Nathan later in the show. We're going to talk about the spirit of Puritanism and the idea of doing a good thing too much, and what that can mean for modern day movements and that kind of stuff. So. But first, did you guys see the mask mandate lift in Texas? Jeez, it's not. That's embarrassing. Oh no! I'm supposed to be pulling up an article here.
A white screen. Oh no!
Yeah, did you guys hear about this? Yeah, this is Texas right now. It froze over.
Yeah, totally ridiculous. Totally ridiculous.
I mean, Texas.
You think so?
They don't like their regulations,
They don't. They very clearly don't. So I guess I kind of figured you would say that, Chris, but I think it's a great thing, right? I think the important distinction to be made is that the government unbanning something or the government no longer mandating something is not an express endorsement of doing the opposite thing, right? So just because Greg Abbott says Texans don't have to wear masks anymore, that doesn't mean that it's not a good idea to wear masks. It just means that you're not going to get arrested for not doing it, which I think it should have been the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of your thought that it's a good thing is because of that underlying belief, right? You didn't feel like the government should have stepped in and said something was illegal to begin with, and I'm pretty sure Chris disagrees, but I know I disagreed with that particular topic.
Is he cutting out for me or everybody?
I'm cutting out?
Yeah, okay. I can hear him pretty well.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it in a previous podcast, but for me, it's actually makes more sense to mandate wearing a mask than to mandate that women cover their breasts, and we're comfortable as a society with that being a law. So I don't really understand why it matters to people so harshly that we, for a temporary time, require the mask. Now, the one good thing I do think that comes from them backing off that mandate is that it does show people that the states will back off, or hopefully they will, right? I don't think it should be a permanent mandate. And I think once we get to a certain level of, vaccinated population, then it needs to be pushed from the federal government as well to the states to say it's time to remove these mandates and let people make their own decisions. But I think it's a little early now. I feel like you run all the way to the end of the race and then you just stop running. I've made this comment with my wife. We've talked about should we let our kids go back to daycare? Should we start going out a little bit more? And we look at each other and we really have suffered and stuck to this for the last year. Why throw that all away when you're this close to the end, right? So I actually think it's an ignorant move on their part, but yeah.
What about you, Chris?
You're muted.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. No, it's just too premature. It's just way too premature. I mean, there's a steep irony that, to me, it's like, here you have the governor of Texas who's all up and vaccinated, and all their key political figures up and vaccinated, whereas 97% of the population, and that's the statistical figure right now, pulled from CDC. I looked it up before the podcast because I figured this conversation.
Is that Texas population or U.S. population?
97% unvaccinated.
I heard 6.7% of the population was vaccinated.
So 93 to 97% are unvaccinated. So sure, plus 3%. The issue is that, sure, I don't think that just because the law no longer requires masks means that everyone's just going to whip it off. But even today, I had a student who has family down in Texas, and her sister was like, yeah, I'm not going to wear a mask anymore if I don't need to. And so you have a lot of people that will think that way. I think, Nathan, maybe you have more faith in society than I do. I don't. I do believe in tyranny of the majority, and I think that, you know, the reality is, here's the reality: there will be people who get COVID that would have otherwise not have had COVID if it wasn't for this mandate being in existence. So people are going to die because of this that didn't need to die. In theory, people will die, and that's
right. But
and I get it. People die all the time, but it's like this is really like. End of the light. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. Vaccinations are rolling out. You just got to wait 2 more months. Like, come on.
But then people are going to die from the flu and from the cold, right? When we start going back into society, and the exact same thing is going to hold true.
Sure. I mean, flu deaths are at like what, 1 person the entire year. 1 child died this year of flu. But what we're saying is that we have already been down this rabbit hole. Like, COVID is a significantly higher death margin. It has definitely put our country into a pandemic. It's preventable. Like, thank God it's preventable. This could have been way worse if you really think about it, right? Like, thank God this airborne virus is blocked by a piece of freaking paper, right? Like, it could have been worse, right? It could have been so much worse. And so we can prevent it. Why not just prevent it? Like, I feel like this is just, I feel like I'm like actually hitting my head against the wall because it's so preventable. Like, at such a large scale, and it's so being done.
Yeah, apparently.
But not
apparently, we could have prevented the flu.
But not nearly to the death margins are just so off. They're not even comparable.
Okay. How many Americans die from car accidents each year, and how many less would die if you brought every speed limit down by 5 miles an hour in the country?
Apples and oranges, man. You can't just say, like, well, people die here.
What I'm trying to illustrate is that there is risk accepted with living, right? And at a certain point, like, I'm not saying that at the height of the pandemic in the middle of the winter, everybody should stop wearing masks. I'm not even saying people should stop wearing masks. No, I'm saying that there's a certain amount of risk that is intrinsic that you take when you step out of your door. And that's up to you to field that risk, right? At a certain point.
Sure, but I think there's also
right, and that's the disagreement, right? Is where that at a certain point is.
Well, I think right? Also, like, we've been in this rabbit hole before, but just to reiterate, it's like we
go watch episode. I don't know which one.
All of them. There's like 3 of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the fact of the matter is, to me at least, is that there's decisions that you make that are egregious that then, you know, yes, sure, like I can go on the highway and some person can choose to drink and drive, right? But that's like a high liability. Like, it is illegal to drink and drive. We make it illegal.
Yeah,
still do
he's
it.
Cutting out
tonight when I go home from the office. Crazy driver. Kind of.
Yeah, is there any way you can save bandwidth?
No. Do you guys hear me now?
Yeah. We can hear you. Yeah. Or not.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we
can hear me again.
Yeah, we could spend the entire podcast again on this topic.
You had a meme about this. Why don't you bring that up? Or I thought it was about this. You said it was a tweet from Greg Abbott.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Can you guys hear me now? Or
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you're just cutting in and out. It's hit or miss. Now it's out.
It's bad. Yeah, I know.
Your video's coming through fine.
I know.
It seems
it's the Wi-Fi of my office. It's the.
Can you turn your video feed off? Maybe that'll help.
Hey, Matthew, if you get a second while we're doing this podcast, if you can go back and look and see which one we did that was heavily focused on COVID. And let me know. I wouldn't mind telling the viewers.
I might just the Wi-Fi in my office is being really bad. Like the whole place just flickered. I don't know what's going on. There's a few other people here too, and they're in the same boat. So I mean, I turned my video off. I don't know if that's helping.
It is, as far as we can tell. I think we could probably forge ahead with this.
All right,
but I missed your face.
I know you're gonna just have to miss my face for a bit. Sorry, guys. But what I was saying, if it's okay to just make this point, because I was really proud of it. I was so proud of it, and then my video, just everything went bad. But I think there's calculated risk in what we do, right? Like every night I drive home from work and I go on I-84, and I-84 is a relatively dangerous highway.
Yes.
Right, but if it's someone's choice to drink and drive, and that is a legal action, right? So there is a penalty held over it. Whereas if somebody is feeling sick and they go out, or they don't even know that they're carrying the virus and they go out and they don't have a mask, there's now no legal protection there. And so that's where my line is, right? It's not just like, hey, there's calculated risk in everything we do, and we have to factor in the weirdos and the assholes out there who do ignore laws and ignore regulations and ignore even common sense, forget laws, right? But for most of the things that people would cause harm to somebody else under the lens of common sense, there's usually a law that also protects or deters, right? And so that's what the mask mandate is. It's a deterrence on it's a government intervention on common sense. And yeah, sure, us, we have it, but there's a lot of yeehaws out there that do not have it. I'm not saying that I'm saying just like yeehaws and idiots, not just Southern people, like everywhere. I was at the grocery store yesterday and someone who was walking around without a mask. So it's just like, come on, why aren't you wearing a mask? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a difference in philosophy. It's past a certain amount of risk. It's not incumbent on the government to tell us how to live our lives, right? We are approaching, and Texas is approaching, if you look at the statistics, they're approaching a very normal level of risk for going out into the public. And the time for mandates is past, even though, again, the time for being careful is not past. I still advocate wearing masks in Texas, right?
Why do you think the time for mandates is past? What changed significantly between a week ago and today that makes it so that mandates shouldn't be there?
This. So these are new cases for COVID right here. They've dropped drastically. This is Texas specifically.
Yeah, but because of masks. Because of the masks, they dropped.
Where in here were masks not mandated? The answer is nowhere. Masks were mandated.
Masks were not mandated in April.
Oh, okay. I can't see the video. That's why. I thought you meant.
I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm showing a graph of new cases in Texas, time over time. And yes, Tim, obviously there were no mask mandates back here, but there were mask mandates this entire period, and we still went up in the winter.
When did the mask mandates go into effect?
Likely back here.
I mean, if we don't know, then you can't say they were all through there. And I'm pretty sure there were no mandates in April. I don't think there were mandates until after the first surge and into the summer spike up.
Right, but okay, my point is that with all of this data right here, masks were mandated, right? And now, to answer your question, what's changed is that we're coming down to the end of the pandemic, right? We're
coming down to the end, but
the winter spike.
People are still susceptible. People still have the virus or out and about with it.
And right? Greg Abbott specifically told people that they are still expected to be responsible, right? I have a quote from him. Hold on. Quote, right? And this is going to be my final point, and we can move on. Removing, or you guys can give your final points, and we can move on. But removing state mandate does not end personal responsibility and caring for your family members, friends, and others in your community. People and businesses don't need the state telling them how to operate. That's it, right? Explicitly stating in his speech, opening up, saying that this does not end your responsibility to be safe. right? It's just we're not going to arrest you for it anymore, and we're not going to keep your business closed past the time where you're going to go out of business.
Yeah, I still think that the even with the case count going down, which I'm not sure, I haven't looked at it recently, so I don't know if it's countrywide or if
Take a look. They're way down.
Or if
way
Texas is unique. But it doesn't matter to me. At this point, my belief is we are comfortable with the mask mandate. It's something that's already been implemented and we are doing. And the only thing that's going to happen from removing the mask mandate is people are going to stop wearing masks, right? That's the only side effect that's going to come from it. More people are going to stop wearing masks. And what's that going to do? It's going to increase the spread of the virus 2 months before everyone's vaccinated, or hopefully the population's vaccinated to the point where it won't spread in the first place. So if we're already under the rules, if they're already in place and we're already doing all these things, why change 2 months prior to solving the problem? If they were talking about implementing a mask mandate at this point, I'd be having a different conversation. I just said, no, if you're going to do it, you should have done it sooner. Like it is what it is at this point. But as it stands, I think it makes no sense at all to remove the mandate at this point.
Fair enough. All right, Chris, final thoughts, and we'll move on.
Well, I think I can just throw my tweet in, but I think it fits in perfectly. It's like today, Greg Abbott's out here saying just some crazy stuff. He goes, the Biden administration is recklessly releasing hundreds of illegal immigrants who have COVID into Texas communities. The Biden administration must immediately end this callous act that exposes Texans and Americans to COVID, which is just not happening. I mean, it is in the sense that like they're working to like reunify kids and families as much as possible, because we have like, I think in the past 2 months, Biden has reunified 500 or so families that were separated. And I get it. Sure, Republicans and those on the right may find it problematic because like, they're in my country's dirt to dirt. But it's their families being separated. So it's like, if you're going to keep them in a cage, at least keep them in one together. And so it's just very silly to me, because I think Greg Abbott is conflating these things and then, just deflecting this whole madness. Because if he's truly afraid of COVID, right? If he's truly afraid of illegal immigrants coming over with COVID, well, then why would he make it either way? Why would he remove the mask mandate? Because even if they had COVID, they would have then been arrested for not wearing a mask if they were running through Stop and Shops with their devilish COVID unmasked faces, right? Like, so it's just so like the contradictions, the irony, it's just level 100 without a doubt on this one.
Yeah, it's like 50 irony. That's like standard political irony, I think.
It's a little extra. It's funny. I laughed when I saw it. Like this is like something the Onion would post.
All right, Tim, what do you have? You got a meme?
Yeah, I've got one. It's not a meme, actually. It's news that kind of goes off of our a little bit off of the racial discussions that we've had in the past. So the title of this article is "Boston Public Schools Suspend Test for Advanced Learning Classes. Concerns about programs, racial inequities linger." And I read through the article, and I think that the title, as often is the case with these articles, is a bit misleading. Although the racial inequality of the advanced students is significant, and they do discuss that. They do say in here that's not the prime driver of shutting this program down for going into next year. It has more to do with COVID and not being able to do the tests and things like that. So, but there was a couple things in here that I thought were interesting data points that I really just wanted to kind of pick your guys' brains about a little bit. So one of them was for the advanced. So these are like advanced classes. You have to test into these, and fifth and sixth grades. 70% of students enrolled in the program were white or Asian, but 80% of all of the Boston Public School students, which is where these advanced students are from, are Hispanic and Black. Right, so So there's a huge disparity of population versus the people making it into this program from a racial standpoint. And I thought that was something that was interesting and wanted to see what your guys' thoughts were. Like, what
Chris,
do
you want to take that one first?
You
Or you want me to go
driving that?
No, you go first on this one.
Okay, so this makes me think of a book. I don't remember who this was. It might have been George Orwell, right? I had to invoke the old, George Orwell. But there was a book in which a society that was maximally aimed at leveling the playing field in every conceivable way was constructed, right? And so people who were strong had to carry around like a ball and chain, and they were shackled down so they couldn't use their strength to advantage them over people.
No, it might be Vonnegut. It might be Vonnegut.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I remember the story, not who it was by, but there was smart people had sounds played into their ears to disrupt their thought patterns every couple seconds.
Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut. That's who you're thinking of.
Right. So the point is that the illustration there was to show a society that goes to insane levels to level the playing field, so to speak, to deny advantage to people who either deserve it or don't deserve it, in the interest of equity, right? Which is again, as opposed to equality, right? There's two slightly different things.
Massively different.
The issue here is that I see the exact same thing with this, right? So what you see is whites and Asians overrepresented in these programs, right? And you can give a whole bunch of different reasons for that, and it likely has to do with, especially with Asians, the work ethic that the parents instill in the children, right? Any Asian, like if you've known Asian people in your life, you generally know that their parents were taskmasters. They set their kids to studying, hours and hours a day. They're very, very interested in making their kids succeed. And that's generally what ends up translating up. But regardless of that, like what you have here is a top-down solution. You have the Kurt Vonnegut solution where you're saying, okay, this process has resulted in disparity, so this process needs to go, right? As opposed to saying, okay, there's disparity as this process is demonstrating, right? This process is a meritocracy. These kids are getting in on their own merit. So why is this problem happening? And then addressing the root problem, which would be poverty, right? Or whatever the problem ends up being. And so this is a top-down ideological solution, which is a totalitarian solution to a problem that needs to be worked at from the ground up.
I pretty much agree. I mean, I think so often we get up. So I'm all here for equity, and I'm all here for. But when I think of equity, I think of opportunity, right?
Right. As do I, actually, equality. That's what I mean by equity.
Yeah, it's like where is the opportunity, right? And so you're right. I mean, the challenges here are improving poverty and improving access to education and improving the opportunities. And there's actually, I'll have to pull this up because I'm gonna cut myself off for a second, but there's a remarkable statistic that was uncovered by the Harvard Kennedy School in one of their government labs, and it blew my mind. It really blew my mind. It basically is like an Einstein phenomenon, and so it's like basically you can figure out how many Einstein-level individuals, like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Einstein's, based on fourth grade math scores. Now, what's interesting here is that when you look at Black and brown communities, poor communities, all fourth grade math scores suck, right? However, there's still a few that could have been Einstein. So out of every couple thousand people, you'll see one pop up that's like way above the curve, still way below average, but given what they had resources of, significantly above the curve.
Right.
But we still let them fall off the map because there's nowhere near the standards that we would anticipate an Einstein to be. It's just they've hit average under impossible odds. Versus had they had reasonable odds, they would have far exceeded. And so there is a huge conversation in education of like, all right, honest to God, this conversation about improving our poor communities to have better education goes so much. I mean, I'm sorry for the tangent, but it goes so much further beyond than just this opportunity of equity, because the more Einsteins, the better our society is.
Agreed. 100%.
There's actually an opportunity to have like the next best innovators, entrepreneurs, engineers, like thought leaders from these communities. Now, the answer is not throw in speakers in people's ears, right? That's not the answer here. So it's not to go at this Kurt Vonnegut style where like the dude ends up shooting the TV with a shotgun and is like, oh, I can't hear anything anyways, whatever. So, you know what I mean? I disagree with this. I think there is a conversation, like you said, to invest in our poor communities, invest in, and make the root cause more opportunistic for educational excellence to be achieved. But we gotta stray from just like holding everybody back. That's not the answer. It's just quite frankly not the answer.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, were you expecting those deep answers? We practically both had speeches prepared for that.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked about education and equality versus equity before, so I figured it wouldn't be a tough one. But I do like when we have some sort of a data point to base something off of. A lot of times we talk in generalities, and then this is a specific example where you have a vast majority, 80% of the population being Black and Hispanic, yet 70% of this population for the advanced schooling is made up of just the 20% that was left over, right, of white and Asians. And I mean, I'm sure that 20% actually has other races in there too, so it's not even of 20%. So there's a huge disparity, and it's an interesting conversation. But I agree. I think the focus needs to be on why is there disparity, and how do we, add resources where they need to be added to give everybody equal opportunity, rather than working to try and ensure that you have equal representation
arbitrarily
of performance, right? Like if I gave everybody the same toolkit, I don't expect everybody's gonna show up with the same work at the end of the day, right? Somebody is a better artist, somebody's a better mechanic, somebody's a better whatever. They're gonna do better with whatever particular toolkit we're giving them than somebody else, and you have to expect that there's going to be some differences. But so anyway, I thought that was an interesting one.
I think too, if it's fair to say, I think a lot of people on the left conflate an issue, and it's that privilege is not a bad thing. It's just how you use it. And that's maybe where we differ, but that's where I stand. It's like there's nothing wrong with being born into a well-off family, inheriting property, inheriting a fortune. It's just a matter of what you do with it, right? Like that's to me where I think
exactly my point, actually, Chris. we just disagree with how to quote unquote use that privilege and who has that privilege, right?
I'm cool with people having privilege. It's just a matter of what you do with it. Like my kids, oh my gosh, my future kids are gonna be so privileged. They're not gonna have anywhere. My life, it's like such a weird thing because I'm gonna have kids in like 10 years. They're gonna have no idea what my life was like, and there's no way they can even grasp like sleeping on a kitchen floor, like in cars. They'll have no idea what sleeping in a car is going to be like unless they, I don't know, go on a weird camping trip. So, and that's okay. That's like not a bad thing, because I think too often we've romanticized lack thereof privilege, or
absolutely
right. And look, I get it. My story, when I share my story, there's some power in that. But there's power in it because it shouldn't happen. And in spite of it happening, I was able to get past that. But people shouldn't have to get past it in the first place. And so for those who do have privilege, use it to lift others up. Don't go out on Instagram and show how every week you have another $400 pair of Nike shoes. That's kind of lame. But like, if you have money, if you have privilege, like influence, use it for good. Also take care of yourself. Make sure you're not, you have a comfortable life. There's nothing wrong with having a comfortable life. That's, I think, what we should all be striving towards. Nobody should have trauma. We need to stop like romanticizing trauma.
But yeah, well, that right there, that's a massive conversation. Romanticizing harm like that. Yeah. Okay. That's huge. That could be like 5 podcasts. And I don't even know what to say, honestly. That's not really my bag. All right. So let's get into the main topic tonight. So Tim, this was actually something that you wanted to talk about, and I thought it's very interesting because I have been thinking about stuff along this lines. And along this lines for the audience, we're going to be talking about historical revisionism. And with that, Tim, go ahead, take it away. So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a normal topic for me, right? I'm more data focused and things you can grasp or whatever. And historical revisionism is generally a more philosophical conversation. I mean, there's obviously
I was
evidence.
very surprised when you picked it, right? Because it's not really your bag.
But what triggered it for me was I was listening to a podcast from Mike Rowe, and he was talking about that topic, historical revisionism, and he told a story of and I can't do it justice, so go watch his podcast. I think it was the one from actually last week, maybe. But anyway, he talks about Benedict Arnold, the famous traitor, right? And I didn't know this ahead of time because I'm terrible with history. I probably knew it at some point. But Benedict Arnold is probably the only reason that the United States is here right now. In the Revolutionary War, he was in the Battle of... I forget the battle. He was in a battle. There was a turning point, right? It was the battle that got the French to decide to support us in the Revolutionary War. And the general that he was under was just kind of shying away from taking necessary steps to win these battles. And so Benedict Arnold went against his general's commands and pushed off on the flank and did what needed to be done. And they ended up winning that battle. He was shot in that battle, wounded, and he
was a hero.
Yeah. And so he was definitely a hero. And he then went on to become a traitor. And that's what he's remembered as, right? As a traitor. The name Benedict Arnold brings that up, and the memorial for him doesn't have his name on it. For him for what he did in that battle to help win it, doesn't even have his name on it. But I think I thought it was a really interesting point. It kind of brought to my thought about revisionist history, where the victors write history, and it's crazy how small of things can happen that will change how you remember. For an example, had Benedict Arnold not been hurt, he probably would have been promoted to general. He probably would have had other things happen. He would have been able to continue that battle as an example to push and win more convincingly, which would have stopped the general from being able to take the credit, which he did. And all of these things kind of piled on to what is suspected as to why he ended up becoming a traitor. Or had he just died in that battle,
right,
he also would have been remembered a hero, but instead he's remembered as a traitor. And so Mike Rowe took that topic and then pushed it into, in California, they're changing all the school names over. I guess they're getting rid of like Washington and Lincoln now are not appropriate. And so it really kind of got me thinking of revisionist history. And the part that I wanted to talk about more than anything was, why is it helpful? Like, why is acknowledging that these things happened? Why can we not respect somebody for their good traits, rather than the traits that were the norm of the time, and focusing on those as bad traits, and things like that. So I really just wanted to have an open discussion. I didn't have any specific topics that I wanted to cover.
No, it's a great point.
First, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll all like ping pong this around, but sure. I think it's a really, really wonderfully complex question, right? Like, how do we revise history, and what does it look like? At the end of the day, every country in the world revises its history. I mean, I vividly remember being back in like second, third, fourth grade, and I probably was around first, second grade, realistically, a younger mind, and learning about like the Indians for the first time, and Christopher Columbus, and Nina the Santa and the Pentamarine, or whatever they are, and then it's like, oh yeah, and I actually remember this. Like, it would be a meme now if you found it. And it was actually a book one of my earliest teachers read, and it was like, and the American or the English folk, when they came over, the Native Americans were cold, and so we shared our blankets with them, and they took Squanto away to go travel the ocean. And when they came back, Squanto's village was dead, because it's like, all right, they purposefully gave smallpox blankets. And so I think, and I'll ping pong this to you, to Nate and Tim, back. I think, honestly, if I'm just going to hit the core of this, if I ask myself, why do we revise history? And I think it's because, in a sense, simple principles appeal to human nature. This is bad. This is good. This is evil. This is right. This is just. This is unjust. Like, we function in black and white terms. And so when we have these complex characters of history, such as Alexander Hamilton, George Washington,
all of them,
because humans are complex. We're complex people who really dug into our lives. And I think that when we look at history and it starts becoming narrative, almost to the sense that it's like a story, it's easier to fill in characters. And also, finally, before I pass it back, I mean, I just think countries, there's a value to be said about the power of, like, nationalism light, like the diet nationalism. Like, if we feel proud of our history and overlook the bad parts of it, it creates a sense of camaraderie. Look at Portugal. Portugal doesn't give a shit about what they did in Brazil, but Portugal loves themselves. Like, Portugal is like a really proud country. If you ever go there and meet Portuguese people, they're so proud to be Portuguese. But they destroyed Brazil, and then Brazil did a revolutionary war basically to reclaim its independence. And Portugal's like, shit, they stole our land. It's like, whoa there. All right. So, you know, but it's pride, it's nationalism. So quite honestly, to simplify my whole statement, people like black and white, and also diet nationalism, I don't endorse it, but I think as a country, as a functioning mechanism, countries will often look towards that as a tool of because especially in the global society, having an us versus them, maybe that's advantageous in a really like sociopathic perspective. Yeah,
that's crazy. So I prepared for this a little bit, and I was actually getting ready to talk about national narratives, right? The story of the country, as it were, right? So I prepared a few statements about this, and I agree with you 100%. The story of the country matters, and I actually would endorse nationalism light. I would just endorse nationalism, generally speaking, as long as it's done correctly, right? You don't need ethno-nationalism. You know, you can't have white nationalism. None of that, right? That's actually where it goes off the rails. Just pure and simple nationalism, or just saying patriotism, right? Patriotism is a good thing. It promotes unity. It allows us all to be playing the same game, and we all respect each other, and we don't have to worry about whether we're going to war or not, right? So, like, national unity is a good thing, right? And what contributes to that is a national story, right? And so I'll try to do this pretty briefly, but humans need, psychologically speaking, we need a low resolution image of a very complex thing, right? And so for example, if you just take a table, right? A table, you could say, look at that right over there. That's a billion atoms. That's a billion trillion atoms right there. Okay, that's not useful, right? But it's true, right? It's all the little things that make it up, right? Or you could say, that's a bunch of boards on top of a metal frame. The metal frame has some paint on it, and the boards have some. That's also not useful. You say that's a table, and that's essentially a narrative or a functional description of it. In the same way that a national story, say, this is America, America was founded, America stands for these things, even though it's much more complicated than that, it's the most useful, and it serves a purpose.
Cool. Oh, sorry if you're not done.
No, go ahead.
A really cool compliment to that, and to an injection in this conversation is that I'm going to get my timeline messed up, so I'm not even going to try there. But if you go back to the time of like ancient Islam, and the dynamic of where Islam was, in a sense, as a global society, or what was at that time a version of a global society, how Islam and Catholicism interacted is actually really interesting, and it speaks directly to this conversation. So if you were in the church, or you were an academic, or a priest, right? There were levels of certain academic engagement that was reached in very, very small quarters. So as you climb the church, being a pastor, minister, other dynamic of religious affiliate and leadership, you reach a point, or academic, where you actually do start dissecting the contradictions of the religion, right? There were spaces all the way back then, but it was only allowed for a privileged few because it was those who can handle the gravity of that, right? Because there is gravity in that. Think about this. When we say, right, when we say that the Bible contradicts itself, does that invalidate a religion? And I would argue, no, it doesn't. And we can have a really in-depth conversation between maybe the three or four of us, right? But now if you go walk into ShopRite and start talking to some random person about this, they're going to be like, what the hell are you saying? And maybe you can even convince them to be like, I don't know, aggressively atheist as a product of this. And so the ancient leaders recognize this and like, all right, we're going to keep the religious contradiction conversations out of the population and just amongst a couple of us because we know it's there.
Yeah, because the narrative is important, and it's too high resolution for the people on the ground to deal with, right? Because all of the adherents of Catholicism, which was all of Europe at the time, they're poor peasants. They don't have time to engage in PhD level dissertation about the contradictions in the philosophy undergirding the Bible. They just don't, right? It's not practical. It's not useful. And so the utility of having the narrative of the religion preserved is sort of self-evident, right? And it's the same thing, like I guess you're tying back with the national story. There's
exactly.
a utility to it. And now let me take that a little bit further, if you don't mind. So as far as revisionism goes, right? So one might say that the national narrative is the first revision, right? We've glossed over the Revolutionary War. You know, we teach it in the United States as a good thing, standing up against the tyranny of Europe and coming up with this new system. And there's a lot of what's that?
In many ways, it wasn't though, right? We can talk about that. Like here's the reality: like we owed so much war debt, and Great Britain was kind of just trying to collect their war debt, and we were just like, wait a minute, no, we're going to be like,
right, and you were taxed at much lower levels than the citizens of England at the time, right? It's complicated, right? Yeah. But that's not very useful, right? So you get the first gloss over. You have the story of the revolution that's taught to kids, right? Kids especially need low resolution stories. And they need heroes to look up to. And so you get that. And that's number one. So what I'm seeing, what has been going on has been a sort of a re-revisionist, but it's called the Revisionist Movement, where people have been, this has been a left-wing movement, have started looking back at history, and they've started deconstructing those narratives, right? They started deconstructing the story of the revolution, the story of America, you know, like the story of the West oftentimes. And a prime example of that would be the 1619 Project. And I don't know how much the viewers or you, Chris, or you, Tim, knows about this. I'm going to say this in a biased way, maybe. I think this is fairly accurate to say that the 1619 Project was from the New York Times. Yeah. It was a group of essays that were brought together to sort of recast the narrative away from 1776 to 1619. 1619 was the first year that slaves arrived in the United States. So the point of that was to say this country has been systemically rooted in racism, and racism has influenced every aspect of the American experience to this day, which is a rewriting of the narrative. Would that be accurate, Chris? Do you think I got that right?
I would say it's a rewriting of the narrative, but I wouldn't necessarily. It's revisionist in the sense that it's changing already revised history. But I would say there's a lot of truth to the fact of the matter that our country was built on a foundation of slavery, and to think otherwise is simply just turning your eye away from the fire. But it doesn't mean we need to hate the country, right? I think that's where I get at. I love the United States. I'm so happy to have been born here, but I can also look at our past. Like, yeah, we were born on a foundation of slavery. There's a conversation there that we can have without all of a sudden having American guilt. And I think that's the where this gets tripped up in the public, right? The resolution is too high, where it's like, am I supposed to be guilty?
That's what I was going to ask you, right?
Yeah.
Because can you teach this to children, right? Can you say
No,
that
you
the
can't.
country?
Well, maybe you can. It depends. And so I would say yes and no. In an idealistic sense, I talked about this when I taught. I can actually.
Have you read it? Have you read all the articles? I did not. I was going to, and then I had to like subscribe or some shit, and so I said, "Screw that."
Exactly. I don't want to give him money.
I just did. To be honest, it's less about the money; is more about I didn't feel like going through the hassle of doing it.
Yeah.
I've talked about this to people before. This is going to get in a vortex here, but I want some sort of like internet me where all web pages you just click a button and you had something run on your computer where it's like, oh, now you have an account and you're logged in and like you could you don't have to. I hate every time I want to do something that like type in all my information and give them more. It's just stop. Facebook's kind of done that, right? Like you can log into a lot of places with your Facebook login.
True.
But then they try and tell all your friends about it, and that pisses me off. So
stop it.
Well,
So anyway, did you read it, Chris?
I skimmed it a bit, but I can say this real quick: is when I taught 5th grade, I was able to. It was very delicate, but I didn't shy away from truths. I didn't shy away from like, let's talk in depth about MLK, Malcolm X. Let's talk in depth about slavery. Let's talk in depth about Ruby Bridges being only 60 something at the time, 64 years old, and it can be done, but I don't know if I have faith in every single American educator and 1st grade teacher across the United States to handle that with the delicate like precision that conversation requires, because you also don't want kids going home and hating their country necessarily, right? You do want kids to be proud of their country, but also see where growth can still occur and where we've come from, right? Like, and so,
Chris, I would argue that unless you have a very principled instructor who says, I believe that the country is rooted in racism and you have all these problems, and that's my low resolution with a bunch of high resolution to back it up. Unless you have instructors who have the quote unquote correct high level or low level resolution, like the educator themselves, unless they actually believe that the country, like you do, that the country is flawed, but there's so much good to it, right? And there's so much, we can become so much better. Unless they actually believe that, it's not going to come out in their lessons, right? And that's where I worry, because I see that a lot of educators are slipping towards the 1619 low resolution narrative.
Which comes into a relative conversation. And Tim, I know you have the point that you were going to make, but just there's now this deep conversation, and I guess this is the hard thing. What do we do as a country, right? Do we continue forward, kind of like the Santa Claus phenomenon of like, all right, Santa's real, and then later on in life, children change their thought processes potentially on this. Maybe I'm not going to spoil Santa, right? Great, Santa's real, but Santa's real. I believe in him, but for our children viewers, Santa is absolutely real. Keep leaving cookies out. But so let's say for
our children viewers, go to bed. It's 9:30. What are you doing,
dude? What the hell? Go to bed. This isn't the Super Bowl. So Squanto, right? Like Squanto being traveling the ocean when he was actually captured. All right. So as a kid, do we have a conversation of doom and gloom as a child, or do we let them evolve their thoughts? And how do we do that, right? Because for many people, what ends up happening is what we're seeing today, and I think we can all agree with this, maybe in different dynamics, but our country is grossly lacking in civic education. Like most people don't know their senators. Most people don't know their reps. And I personally, I don't care if people are voting or not. I personally find that problematic. And so I think there's something to be said about the civics through the K-12 system, and how we gloss over it, how we revise to the point where it's like, oh yeah, everything's great, so why should I worry? Where it's more like, hey, there's a lot of flaws. Our country's really lovable, but it needs some therapy, and you can be that person that does that. So that's where I believe in it. But that's the great debate, right?
Absolutely.
Tim, you have the floor.
I guess just to kind of bring it back in general, I don't know if you guys noticed my background.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with revisionist history because it can move really quickly into censorship.
Yeah.
And so in particular, my background, it's a pretty famous story that Stalin would have people removed from photographs that he was in that, ended up not meeting, his requirements. I think this particular person that he had removed, he had shot and killed, and then they were removed. So that's an extreme case, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to be very careful with what you're removing, and to me, history is fixed. How we remember history varies. Who writes history varies, but what actually happened is fixed, right? Something specific did happen,
right?
And all of those things that happened resulted in where we are today, right? I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I wish I could go back and not make them at this point, right? But I have made them, and I am who I am today because of that.
Yeah.
Right? This country is who it is today because of everything that's happened in our history, including our mistakes. And to try and ignore that or rewrite that or not acknowledge them, I think is a mistake in itself.
Beautifully said.
So I'm not a big fan of rewriting history or ignoring things. And I also, I saw a quote today, and I don't know who it's from. I tried to find it. I think someone just made a meme, and it was a really good quote. And it said something along the lines of, if you only remember your heroes for their worst qualities, you won't have any heroes left.
Yeah,
something along those lines, right? And so, looking back at our history, talking about, President Washington, President Lincoln, Benedict Arnold, right? As an example, like all of these people did have massively good qualities and things that they brought to this country. And rather than focusing on the good that they did and only focusing on the bad, I think is a detriment. I believe that the California School Board has moved to remove, including Washington and Lincoln, the names of I think 40-something schools, to change the names in California. And I don't really care what the schools are named, to be honest with you. But it's the premise of it. Like, what is it about Washington?
It's the idea.
Yeah, what is it about Washington that is all of a sudden terrible? That we can't have him.
Is it the fact that he was offered a kingship over the United States and he rejected it? Is that what's really turning you off to him?
I believe it's because he owned slaves.
Yeah, of course, right? Of course it is, and it's the same thing. It's like Martin Luther King Jr. is the most influential, or one of the most influential, civil rights activists in the 20th century, right? And he was, by today's standards, a virulent sexist, right? But that's not what we remember him for. His contributions, again, they far outweigh his negative attitudes towards women, so to speak, right? And so it comes down to this awkward conversation of almost nobody in history before, say, 1950, all of them, like almost nobody holds the standards that let's say the woke left or the left would, or most. Let's not even say that. Let's not be a person.
People.
Yeah, most modern Americans.
Changed.
Right, because civilizations change, and the question is, can we still celebrate the things in the past that resulted in good things today? And that includes a whole bunch of horrible things, right? Every single country in Europe has committed, just war crimes upon war crimes by modern standards. The whole, all of history, all of human history.
Go look at any British museum, dude. It's like artifacts from the world.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's that interesting thing, right? So it's like the idea of an empire or colonialism or like all of this stuff where you impose your will upon another person. It's now verboten, right? It's against the modern sensibilities. Yet if empires had never formed, we would have never. So, like for example, if the Persian Empire had never formed, right, which was bloody, and when I mean bloody, I mean when you take a city, you rape, murder, and pillage, and take all of their shit, burn the city down, right? If that stuff didn't happen, we wouldn't have had Sargon of Akkad, who put out the first codified law. We wouldn't have had the Persian Empire, which came up with a system for taxation, administration, something else they did, administration, law, taxes, right? The unification of the Roman Empire resulted in Pax Romana, in which life expectancy extended by years and years. Art, philosophy, and architecture flourished under the Roman Empire, right? The Islamic Golden Age was a breeding ground for universities, mathematics, advances in medicine, right? And the Islamic world was forged by blood and fire, right? And it's like we have to contend with, and this is it's a very weird contradiction to the modern person. We have to contend with the idea that everything that we have today is the result of absolute atrocities, right? And you can even put some of that at the beginning of this country, right? Now, you have to be careful when you say that we killed the Native Americans. We committed atrocities against them, but most of them died from smallpox, which, like, again, you can't really, we didn't know about germ warfare, right? We didn't do that on purpose, right? But we did commit atrocities against them, right? And we did have slavery in this country, right?
We did know the smallpox plagues were going to kill them.
That's okay. So I'll get to that later. That's probably not true, right? We didn't have germ theory.
I've read that they weren't aware of it, but I can't say for sure. I wanted to say one thing though on your comments there, Nate, which is you're making them in a way that sounds like you're saying we wouldn't have these things had these atrocities not happened, and that may be true. But I also think it could be very possible that we could be better off. We could be further along without these atrocities. And, to simplify it, to go back to, mistakes I've made in my life, some of them have resulted in good characteristic changes for me, but some of them didn't. Maybe they only cost me things, in my personality or in my life. So, but to say that because we had these, we got, we learned about taxation. Well, maybe the civilizations that they, raped, murdered, pillaged, and burned to the ground would have developed that faster, or something else.
Except for the first one that I mentioned, Sargon of Akkad, everybody else was taking over an empire that already put cities to the sword.
Right. I mean, my point is that we don't know what would have been, and I don't like the idea. And it's not. I guess I shouldn't say I don't like. I don't believe the idea that that we have achieved the best possible path forward as a human species that's possible, right?
I'm not saying that.
And so I think to look back and say that all these atrocities were necessary to get to where we were isn't true, but they did happen, right? And we are where we are because of them. Let's acknowledge them, learn from them, and move forward.
I think too, to be honest, is that it's quite honestly, we have to look at our past as circumstances of the occasion. And so today, obviously, we're not going to say the best path forward is invading South America.
Right. But although it might be, honestly, they could probably use it.
No, definitely not the right decision. But for modern today, I mean, our decisions are different. Our standards are different. But we also have the privilege of having our standards to be different. We have levels of communication across societies, across languages that never existed before. We have levels of engagement, of diplomacy, of problem solving, of trade that never existed, at least nowhere near the scale that it does today. So I think I will take the benefit of hey, maybe not the most ideal society of the world. Maybe there's a lot of other ways this could have played out. But hey, we did okay. And in the sense that today our standards have the privilege of being different. Whereas in the past, it's a bit different. Survival of your country, when everybody's trying to invade, invasion becomes a necessity, right? It's and that's not cute, it's not pretty, it's not nice, but it is kind of what happened. And so I think it just kind of comes down back to the circling it back. It's it's okay for us to have high standards today. We shouldn't lower our standards, but in terms of resolution, we should look at the past in different lenses.
For sure.
For me, I mean, even today, right? Tim, I think you said it beautifully. Everyone's broken to some extent. Everyone's done stuff they're not proud of. That's the point of being human. That's literally we all have beautiful parts of our life, and we all have places that we're like, we could have done that better. And that as an aggregate makes us who we are, and our history is one and the same of that of a human, because it is human. It's made of billions of us. And one of the people I look up to the most, it's really funny, a little bit immature, I guess, but at this point, but there's a singer of a band. His name's like Ronnie Radke. He's like my childhood hero, dude, and he's like one of the only people I've ever looked up to through my whole life. He was a singer of this like metalcore band. He ended up going to prison for doing heroin, getting in some random fight. Spent 2 years in jail. Comes out.
You sure know how to pick them.
Yeah, I know. And look, the dude's an asshole. He also has a good heart. Like he seems genuinely nice if you listen to his podcast, but he's a complex person. Like he's gotten arrested for throwing a microphone stand off the stage and it hit somebody in the face. He didn't mean to, but the fan didn't care. But like he got arrested for it. And so, but here's the thing. I admire the dude so much because even though he went to jail in a scene of music that is by far and large dying, he comes back out of jail and builds a new band, one of the most successful acts in the metalcore world. And I really like his music. It's honest. It's there. It's real. And I really respect the guy. He's not perfect, but it's like, who is perfect? And I think that same way of looking at Ronnie is the way I look at the characters of the past. Like Hamilton cheated on his wife. Hamilton did some really bad decisions. And at the same time, he established our national bank. He was a leading figure in the Revolutionary War. He's one of the few founding fathers, if not the only, that adamantly spoke out against slavery, and against racism at the time, way beyond his years. But he also did some bad things. And so, do we treat Hamilton as the adulterer, or do we treat Hamilton as the founder of our country? And I say we treat him as both, because he's a broken person just like the rest of us.
I Googled Ronnie Radke, and the first article that came up said, "Why does everyone hate Ronnie Radke?"
It's so real. I love Ronnie.
So let me tie it in. So I think there's a problem with, so if we talk about the problems with revisionism, right? Because, you've got Tim, you have, Stalin behind you doing some revisionism, right? And you could probably argue there's different forms of revisionism, right? There's different reasons for it. And we see a little bit of it going on today, right? We see a little bit of the, we can't have the high school named this, although that bleeds over into we're deciding who to honor, right? And that goes into narrative. So not kind of revisionism, but also kind of a national narrative thing. And then there's you've got like the New York Times will go back and stealth edit an article that they got wrong about some conservative, and they won't actually admit that they did it wrong, but they'll stealth edit it, right? So they're kind of like revising that way. So it's not so bad in our society yet, right? Certainly not as bad as the Soviet Union, certainly not as bad as in 1984 when the guy his job was to edit the past, right? Because the past, quote unquote, was currently changing, right? There would be a news article about a war that happened 20 years ago, and then the national story would change, right? Because the totalitarian leaders wanted us the population to believe that they were at war with another country, so they had to go back and edit all the articles, and then the national narrative would change again, and then they have to go back and edit all the articles, right? So obviously we're nowhere near that. But what I do see, Chris, is that the universities, not all of the departments, but a lot of the professors have the low resolution, or let's say ideological story that the country is rooted in racism. And when they go back to do the correct thing, the high resolution, when they go back for that high resolution, it's ideologically tainted, right? So they'll just focus in on the things that support the 1619 idea that the United States is, like, for example, the blankets thing, right? The blankets thing has been debunked, right? So that was back.
It looks like the Native Americans already had smallpox, and then they did genuinely try to give them blankets, but it didn't work. But the intention was there.
How do you know the intention was
Because they gave them,
Time travel,
they gave
dumbass.
them infected blankets.
Okay,
And then
but again, like that I'm telling you. So we don't have our sources pulled up, either of us, so that we can't go into this. But I've listened to a very long podcast that actually specifically went into that incident and debunked it. Right?
well, let's say it's debunked and just continue the conversation forward because it's trivial.
Right, but it's not trivial, right? So that small thing is a part of a larger thing, right? So I forget what that guy's name was. It might have been Zinn. Whatever. There was a famous guy who started rewriting textbooks in the 90s who was going back, and from a leftist ideological point, he was saying this stuff actually happened this way. America is the bad guy, right? And that's it's valuable so that you can reformat the country in the way that you want to. But my question to you is do you see at all any ideological influence on the revisionism or the revolution that we're generating?
Yeah, and I think this is where it comes into play. Like, honestly, this is where quality education matters. This is where I think we need to. All right, I'm going to sound radical here, but I actually believe that we should have fewer colleges. I think colleges should become harder to get into. I think we should make colleges specifically. I'm speaking at the 18 to 24-year-old level education, not the high school, all that good stuff. I think we should make it more competitive, and in doing so, keep just the best of the professors, because the best professors, even if you're like, I'm ideologically motivated, right? Like I have my beliefs.
I am. Maybe Tim is, but I am.
Hell yeah, I can acknowledge my beliefs, but I'm gonna be an adjunct in the fall, right? I'm gonna be teaching community engagement at a university. You better believe I'm gonna recognize my bias as much as possible. You better believe that the core subjects that I'm teaching are gonna be honest and true, and I'm going to check my devil's advocates. I'm gonna make sure, like, hey, what are your thoughts? Like, I'll go to my conservative colleagues and be like, hey, what are you? If it comes to it, like, and maybe I don't actually
have any conservative colleagues, man.
Well, I'll go to you, but for what it's worth, maybe I won't take everything you say, but at least I'm giving the benefit, right? And so
I'm here for you, man. I'm here.
Yeah, well, I think that's where we're more academic. That's what I see at Harvard. It was one of the biggest distinctions, and one of the reasons why I transferred, because originally I was doing a graduate program at a state university. I was doing really well there. Like rocking that 4.0, like because that matters. Because it matters so much. And I remember, like, I had some classes. I was just like, "Are you kidding me right now?" I had a textbook. Oh my gosh, Nathan, Tim, I need to find you this book. You would love it. You would lose your mind over it. I actually, as a social justice,
read it.
Tim can't read.
It makes me. No, I've never read a book before. It was meant to be like counseling diverse communities, and the whole book was just shitting on white people, and not just shitting on them in the sense like conservatives like to get on.
I saw a video of that.
Yeah, but it was, and I'm not just saying this because, like, I don't know, I'm like half.
Sorry, viewers.
I'm half Iranian. Like, if I'm passing as a white Caucasian person, but I'm like, the thing is, while reading this book, the professors literally were like screenshotting text messages and rate my professor reviews of people who hated the class for the same reason I'm expressing it, put it in the book, and then use that as an example of explaining this is why white people don't understand what I'm saying. And I was reading, I'm like, the whole class, we were like, why is this book being taught right now? And so that's one of the reasons I transferred to Harvard, was because I was seeing a level of education that was deceptive and not fully, it wasn't the full picture. And whereas Harvard, I didn't go there for the name. I had other options as well, but I went to Harvard because when I really did my research on it, I'm like, I know the level of education I'm going to receive is going to be honest. It's going to have integrity. It's going to make me think. It's going to challenge my biases. And that's what I wanted. And for what it's worth, in many ways, Harvard has made me way more progressive. In many ways, it's also grounded me on certain things. It's really grounded me on education policy. It's really grounded me on, I guess, conversations such as this. it has absolutely shot me forward when it comes to urban policy and when it comes to understanding how representative democracy functions. But at least I'm not reading books that rate my professor complaints are being screenshotted in and said, yeah, this person rated my class 1 star because they don't understand what I'm teaching. And it's just like, oh my God. So I'll have to find the book. You guys will get a kick out of it. I'll just text you some screenshots.
I need it. I need that book. Honestly, I got it. I need it.
I had to rate one of my professors 1 star. He's the thermodynamics guy. He was terrible. He just would sit there.
I'm sure.
I think my fiance's taking. No. I have a student taking thermodynamics right now.
It's a great course. I loved it, but honestly, I had to take it twice because I. Long story short, Vortex. I had like a 90-something percentage in the class, but I never went to class because the professor was that terrible. It was like a negative usage of time. And he failed me for not going to class, and the dean wouldn't overturn it, even though I had the 90-something percent.
Damn.
So I had to take it again. Yeah.
That's
but anyway, tell me about it. It was on the syllabus. That was the.
I feel like you're revising that history a little bit, Timothy.
Nope. I went to the dean. I took it all the way up to the dean. I went to the student dean first, and then, or whatever they're called, the intermediary dean. And then the academic dean, and then I went to the main dean, and they said, "Look, it's on the syllabus." That he said there's an attendance requirement. And I was like, "Look, I'm paying you. You're not paying me. I don't need a babysitter." But
yeah, right, look, okay. Let me make one more point. Okay, so on this, so I'm glad to hear, Chris, that you acknowledge, at least some of it, right? I would encourage you, and we can talk about this now, I suppose, to think more broadly about ideology influencing our historical perspective, right? And it's not just slavery, right? It's not just our treatment of Native Americans. You can check, like, for example, the role of women in society, right? There is a very interesting set of data about that, right? There's so many stories about, okay, women could do this, women couldn't do this. Men who cheated on their wives were, treated this way, this, that, and the other thing, right? So it's like, I don't actually have any of this up, so it's falling a little flat. But like all of these different topics, right? So whatever it is, whatever the hot button issues are today that have historical draws, right? A lot of them are being reinterpreted to fit ideological lines, right? And it's sort of like a self-serving thing where you just go back and you do the immature thing where you take data points that support your narrative, like here's a woman being oppressed, here's a woman being oppressed, here's a woman being oppressed, and then you sort of like copy paste it into your book, and then you write a book about how women were oppressed all throughout history. Whereas it's like it's way more complex than that. Like everybody was oppressed. Like men were dying in battle, men were dying just as much as women. Like whatever it is, even if the genders were experiencing it differently, like life was shitty for everybody in the past, And so it just, you take that, you broaden that out to everything. It's like, people cherry pick, for example, people cherry pick a lot of stuff about slavery in the United States of America. It's like, well, slavery was very common in the past, like very, very common. And a lot of white people were enslaved. The Arabian slave trade went all the way up through the 19th century. It's like, there's the more that you look at the past, the harder it is to fit into ideologies, yet it is being crammed into ideologies left and right.
Yeah, I think this is kind of subjective, I guess, but I was thinking about how much we don't edit other people's histories as much maybe as we do our own sometimes too. Like if you think of the Aztecs, like if we were Aztecs, do you think we'd be teaching everybody that we used to cut our, other citizens' hearts out while they were still beating to sacrifice them to the gods, or would we have revised that, right? Like, but we do teach it now because it's not us. It's a lot easier to teach the bad things about other people than it is about yourselves. And I think one of the negatives of that, though, is then you get this idea that maybe you can't be bad or do, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I find that I get so much value out of learning from mistakes and things that I know of people, myself or other people I specifically know making.
Well, maybe it's an age and interest thing, right? So maybe it should be posited that the low resolution image of the country should probably be fairly good, right? I'm not saying all the way glossy, but I think the low resolution image you teach to children should be pretty good. Then as you move up through the education system, right? You get to high school, give them more resolution, right? Say, hey, it actually, it wasn't that good. We actually did some bad things to the Native Americans, right? And then when you get to college, that's when you should be high resolution, focusing in on the issues in a dispassionate, historically accurate way, right? And that way,
do we need to do that for kids?
What's that?
Do we need to do that for kids?
I'm saying, yeah, we do. So children need much more symbolic narrative stories to be told to them, essentially, over the high resolution. They can't really handle the high resolution.
Well, example, I don't mean getting into all the details, but I guess let me give somewhat of an analogy. My son's 3 years old, and earlier this year, a while back, he was watching Lion King for the first time, and my wife fast forwarded through the part where his father gets killed.
Why?
I mean, it's sort of revisionist history, right? It's changing the actual story to a narrative that you're trying to portray. And so the second time he watched it, I was there with him, and I didn't let it fast forward, and it hit him hard. Like he was just sitting there, like his dad. What happened to his dad? Is his dad hurt? But why is this a topic that we should just not let them be aware of? And I get this is a crazy, like a little bit of a side tangent analogy, but it kind of goes back to like, are they not capable of understanding these things? I mean, and I don't know this, I'm asking, are there studies that show that at certain ages you can't understand, you can't learn from these things, they impact you only negatively? Or is this just our trying to be nice to kids thing?
I think that's the grand question of parenting. I don't think there is an answer. I think but I do. I mean, do you guys ever? Do you remember like N64s? And there's like that racing game, and there was also it was in. I promise you, this will make a point. And you know how like in arcades, like they would have those racing games where like every car has different stats, but some cars are like very average. Other cars are super fast but terrible traction. Other ones have like remarkable traction, but there's no perfect car, right? There's no car that's like you can zoom at like 150 miles an hour and also like curve the
turn out a dime,
right. I think that life and these complex questions is very much like picking your car in the racing game to oversimplify. It's like, you might get really good traction on this decision, but you're not going to get as much speed as you normally would, and vice versa. And take that as you will. But I don't know. I know I'm not a parent, so I can't speak on that. I will be in the next 5-10 years, and I hope I aspire to be the parent that keeps my kid as hopeful as possible in the world without shying away from the hard conversations. I think I would want to do exactly that and show them the Lion King video, even if it hurts them, because it's also, the love I think you give as a parent, that love, that compassion, that's the suit of armor that you build for them that they're going to take on through the rest of the world. And so when they do have these hard things, when they do realize like the complexion of our history, well, hey, they got their suit of armor. They know what love is. They know what compassion is. And with that, they know that this country, in a sense, like creates environments for that to materialize in the first place, and the harder truths, they're ready to brace for it. And that's what I would aspire to do. But I'm also 25 and I have no kids, so it's very easy for me to say that right now.
True. Disclaimer: I don't have kids either. All the psychology I know about is probably generally from I took a couple classes in college, but Jordan Peterson, generally speaking, who is a clinical psychologist. So,
is he really?
Oh yeah, 20 years.
Look at him go! I had no idea.
We should do.
I don't listen to him.
You and I should sit down and watch Jordan Peterson for a couple hours one day. I think you'll find it very instructive. Jordan Peterson is Jesus. Okay, all right. Are you satisfied with that? I think it's about time to move on to our next segment. This is the vaunted, the returning by popular fan request. This is the bullshit philosophy with Nathan. And tonight we're going to be talking about, actually right here we're playing the little intro, like bullshit philosophy with Nathan. There it is. All right. So for tonight we're going to be talking about cancel culture and Puritanism, right? So this idea about, let's try to build this here. So there's this idea that we hold, right? And there's a bit of a contradiction, right? So if you have a good thing, right? Say the Puritans were good practicing Christians, but you do it too much, is that a problem, right? And so let's outline that in some cultural examples right now. So I would say the left is very, very progressive on things like gender, race, sexuality, like a whole bunch of social issues, right? And they're pushing very, very hard for good things, right, so to speak, right? Just as you could say back in the 90s, the right was pushing for moral standards that the rest of the country didn't really hold, right? So you have two sides, you have the left and the right, and they're doing ostensibly good things, right? The right was trying to protect children, and the left is trying to protect whatever the class is, black people, trans people, women, whatever it is, right? And you're trying to protect those people. But it seems to be that you get to a point where you start losing people, right? You're being too good or too pushy, right? And I think it's worth discovering or discussing amongst the three of us. Like, what do you think that phenomena is? What's the limit between pushing too hard on your good ideology and pushing just hard enough? What's the difference? Is it that you're pushing too hard, or is it that you're doing it in a certain way? What do you think?
I think it's a pendulum. I think that there's a general point, of balance for most people. Everybody has their own limit and balance, but I think if you averaged it out, right, there's a point, and you don't know where that point is necessarily. A and B, if you are trying to make changes, then you're probably to one side of that point or the other. So you have momentum, you're pushing, you're going. And you go right on past that point of, the median, and you keep going until you get to the extreme. And then, people stop pushing. It stops to fade, and it'll swing back and most likely go back across a bit until you find that median point. It probably takes a lot of time to get to a point where a topic's really not a topic anymore, and you just move on to the next topic, right?
Right. So, Chris, let me contextualize this. Maybe you can respond directly to this. So a Puritan example on the left, right? And I bring this up because hey, right here, I like to, mac on the left a little bit. But again, this is a left and right thing. The right was doing it in the 90s. But for example, the thing that hit me really hard today and got me really spooled up and frankly, kind of angry is that they're pulling 6 Doctor Who books.
I thought.
Or Dr. Seuss. I'm sorry, Doctor Who. Dr. Seuss books. I don't know about, if there's Doctor Who books. But,
yeah.
And this, to me, there's a whole bunch of things that we can talk about with pulling Dr. Seuss books, right? You can talk about censorship on its own. You can talk about free speech on its own. But I'd already selected the topic of Puritanism, and this fits here, right? This fits. So we can talk about how this is a Puritan thing backfiring. And so for those who don't know, let me just tell the story or explain what's going on with Dr. Seuss. They pulled 6 books. The Dr. Seuss estate voluntarily decided under pressure from social pressure from the left that they were no longer going to be selling 6 Dr. Seuss books. And these were because of quote unquote racist depictions of for example, Asians. I know there was a racist depiction of a Middle Eastern person. And I say quote unquote, on purpose, right? Because
what is the racist depiction?
They're really not racist, to be honest. They're caricaturized just as everything is in a Dr. Seuss book.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. So
I have probably the most egregious example. Can you see? Chris, and for anybody who's listening and can't see, so there's a very clearly yellow Asian person. They're wearing the sort of the cone hat. He's got a rice bowl in front of him with sticks. He's wearing clogs, and he has the thing that the stereotypical Chinaman has, the long ponytail or tail. I don't even know what it's called.
What is the one on the left versus the right? Is that what they're changing?
I'm not exactly sure about that. This was just the image I could pull up. It's probably the modern rendition.
I actually went and read the whole book today. I went on YouTube and just went through a playthrough of what I saw on Mulberry Street, because I didn't remember the book from when I was a kid.
Right.
Yeah, this is way too far of cancel culture. This is deep far because what the whole premise of the book is that this young kid leaves his house. And by spending time just observing the world, he sees so much happen. He sees so many different people. He sees a person that is Chinese. He sees a bunch of other different races, ethnicities. Like, it's not racist. Like, the dude's experiencing a bunch of different cultures. That's to me what the book is about.
Right.
Now let's say, genuinely, honest to God, there's a strong debate, which I don't think there is. I didn't even know this was a debate. But let's just say that there is a strong debate to be had on Dr. Seuss's book. Why couldn't you just publish it with like a disclaimer page and be like, "Hey, we're keeping this published, but these are some thoughts. Use this at your own discretion, right? Like, read this. This is what we believe Dr. Seuss intended the book to be." Why can't you have? Why would you just cancel it all together? Why not have a larger discourse, especially? I see nothing wrong with this book.
Right, or any of the books, right? Because, in fact, Dr. Seuss was almost literally anti-racist in the modern sense, but he certainly was not a racist person, right? I have a comic up right now, which is, I think it was one that he had, it was close to World War II. It was probably back in the 50s, but it's, for those who can't see it, it's a comic that Dr. Seuss drew. It says, "What this country needs is a good mental insecticide." And it's a line of people walking up to Uncle Sam, and he's blowing insecticide through their head, and out the other side is coming the racial prejudice bug. So this guy was a progressive by probably the standards in the 50s, right? Certainly in the 40s. He was a vehemently anti Nazi person, right? And this just was who he was. Right, and we know that, right, from all the context and all we know about the guy, we know he's not racist. But from the puritanical standards of the modern left, right, because it is the left doing this right now, right? The puritanical standards, it's not that he intended to, it's that I, the observer now, think that is a racist depiction, therefore this has to go. Right? So it's not even intent anymore.
It's quite problematic because it does a couple consequences that are entailed to this, and first and foremost, there's nothing wrong with these books. Like, we know that, and that's why I was like, when I first saw, I'm like, what the hell? Like, I went online, I was like, I watched the book, and on YouTube, I was like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this. Same thing with Mr. Potato Head. Like, come on, why are you canceling Mr. Potato Head? And it's really, I'm really like, don't know what to make of the left, because I think it's twofold. First and foremost, there's a faction of the left who really, I guess, cares about this stuff, and they make these decisions, and then we wake up with it the next day and be like, what? Like, who asked for this?
Right.
The second part about it is there's what exhausts me is I think of Portlandia when I see stuff like this. I think of the Portlandia people. You have all these people who have exhausted so much energy, and they have a victory, right? Someone out there right now is rejoicing. They're like, yeah, we lobbied Dr. Seuss's publishing company to delete these books, and it must be a huge joy. Imagine if they put that energy in places that things actually needed to happen, right? Like there are places where there is serious conversation to be had about racial insensitive racial depictions. I can't think off the top of my head right now, but they're there, right? There's definitely, if you're really passionate about it, there are places to have that discourse. But we're getting into dangerous levels of censorship where the second
I would say this, and both of you push back on me if you think I'm being hyperbolic. there is no, or maybe only one or two meaningful distinctions between this and book burning, right?
Yeah.
Because you essentially now need to have a black market for this book. And if you go onto Amazon right now, I actually have this pulled up, and you can look at this. You're not going to be able to see it, but this is the price right here for McElligot's Pool. It's $600, right? This Dr. Seuss book, right? This is effectively removed from circulation, which is basically book burning, right? And this is happening for other books, right? This is happening for anybody that tries to. This is happening to a lot of people who are trying to challenge some of the dominant leftist narratives, right? A lot of very, very well-researched, well-reasoned books talking about trans people, right? Not even saying that they're bad or that they should be treated horribly. It's just like speaking on the trans issue from a right-wing perspective. Target literally dropped one of those books, right? And this is like there's a sort of like a you just can't contradict the narrative in polite society anymore, right? It's puritanical. You absolutely just like you can't talk about it, right? And like
Mulberry Street is literally, I just pulled up on eBay. It's bidding for like $200 for, like, people are bidding on it. It's not just like being listed as these prices. Like, they're actually selling for these prices, which, you're right, makes it effectively canceled. Something to be said is it's interesting because there's a convergence point here that I'm seeing, is that we see the Mr. Potato Head cancel and you see Dr. Seuss cancel, and these are one of the same coin, right? Like, this is the energy from the left canceling these. But historically, I say historically, but through my lifetime, I've often seen books being canceled by right efforts, right? Like southern states like Alabama, who choose to not read To Kill a Mockingbird because it says the N-word. And they use that as their reason to not teach it, but it's because it
I heard that was the left that banned that because it said the N-word.
No, we're getting southern states predominantly, red southern states predominantly ban the book, and they say it's because it has the N-word, which is why they're banning.
No, you did it. No, you did it.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of funny. Literally, the narrative that came out, the narrative from the right, like Ben Shapiro, Stephen Crowder, all of them were saying that this was a leftist push.
Oh no! This Dr. Seuss is a leftist push, but To Kill a Mockingbird, I've always perceived as a right push. But I guess that's why we come together to realize these things. So, but I'm not saying that as like a whataboutism, but more of just like, I think books are one of the things that I hold to such a high standard that they shouldn't be canceled unless you're reading some like monster porn book, right? That's different. Like, there's a market for that, right?
Wait, how is that different?
I just don't think that's okay. Like, monster erotica is just weird, right? But I make it accessible, whatever, right? But Dr. Seuss, To Kill a Mockingbird, these are books that I think it almost comes back into our main core conversation. It's about resolution, right? Like, I think these are perfect opportunities to amp up the resolution and say, all right, if there truly is a conversation to be had on these books, let's actually have them. Let's not just default to canceling it. That's silly.
Right. So,
I mean, I'm not a literary scholar, so I don't. I can't speak.
Why would you be a literary scholar?
Just for the fact, state the fact. That I can read. Okay. I do not enjoy reading, though. I don't read books as a hobby at all. But I'm not a literary scholar, so I don't recall from my childhood as much some of these books. Kill a Mockingbird as an example. Like, I don't care if particularly that book is now replaced by a different book in curriculum, right? There is, to me, there is changing of curriculum over time, things that we find are better to teach or worse or whatever. But the reasons why they're replaced matter, I think. And if it's, this book has a word in it that we don't like anymore, everything else about the book and everything it teaches, we still want to teach, but it has one word in it that now doesn't fit in with our culture. I think that's, a bit of a strong take. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, though, is like, I expect that we're going to have books that aren't taught anymore as time goes on, replaced by newer books, different books, not necessarily newer, but other books, right? So just because the book you were, told to read when you were in school isn't given to your children isn't necessarily a bad thing. We just have to be careful at looking why we're making these changes. Are they to improve the curriculum, to broaden the spectrum, or is it to censor and remove, things that we don't like about our culture?
I totally agree, right? Because there's a million books out there that you can, in theory, substitute To Kill a Mockingbird with to teach race dynamics of the 1900s. There's a bunch of books out there. I mean, you can take Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson and replace it with that, which is a true story, but one of very much the same dynamics of To Kill a Mockingbird, but just happening in real life, Montgomery, Alabama. And so, but when we replace a book such as Dr. Seuss, right, to think I saw it on Mulberry Street, to take that book out of context because of something that it's a scapegoat, right? It's a scapegoat, and it's quite honestly, it's taking fire away from the true problem, because now you have a lot of people, us included in this at this point, they're like, come on, why are you doing that? It's hurting the cause of progressives. It's hurting the cause of the left. Most of us, it's hurting us. It's also, quite honestly, it's just takes away fire from the actual, or fuel from the fire of true debates that should be happening. It's it's internet warriors. It's fucking internet warriors. It's people that get 30,000 retweets on Twitter, and they think that because they got the population of a small town to look at their words, that now they can change the world. And it's no, go actually change the world.
Right. And there's another element to this, right? So I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's going to be 5 or 10% of the population, right? And there was actually some famous somebody somewhere, right? It's horrible. I don't know who or where or why, but it said that for a radical element to take over society, they only need 10 or 15%, and they just need to be vocal, and the rest of the society, feels bad about speaking out against them, right? So part of that is that what we're seeing here, with all of this stuff, with cancel culture mixed in with resulting from the radical puritanism, being pure racial justice, pure whatever it is, part of that is that the common person can't speak out against this, right? So when Gina Carano is fired, most people don't know how to speak out against that. They don't have the tools that I have, that Tim is learning by speaking with the two of us. That Jordan Peterson has, that the Young Turks have. The average person doesn't have the tools to fight back against that, right? And it was the exact same thing in the Soviet Union, right? If you read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago, he talks in the beginning about how the arrests against the civilians, which everybody knew were kind of fraudulent, everybody kind of knew, but they were just arresting millions and millions of people, but nobody would speak up about it, because nobody else was speaking up about it, right? And then there's the sneaking suspicion, well, maybe that person is, a Bolshevik, or that person is, trucking an anti-Soviet, propaganda, and then you just let it go, and you let it go, and let it go, and eventually they come for you, right? And you're seeing, I'm trying not to blow it out of proportion, but you are seeing a parallel to a system that is beginning to spin up on the left today, right? It's, you can't speak out against the sort of citadel of truths, of social justice truths in polite society, even though there's a very good conversation, and we have those conversations all the time here, and we haven't been canceled because we're not famous, and hopefully we never are, but
canceled or famous?
Yeah. Look, so my point is that it's gone too far. We've seen this in history before. People need to be able to, Chris, you're here on this show. You are a self-professed social justice warrior, but
hell yeah.
What point do they come for you? You've already said enough to hang yourself 10 times over on this show.
Yeah, I mean, I've already gotten micro hung at times, and I realize it's kind of crazy, but I imagine it's quite the same phenomenon as the QAnon people on the right. It's not economic anymore. it's become like socially extreme, and so I'm a socialist at heart, Nathan and Tim. Like, I believe in a world, like, if I can build the perfect utopia, which will never happen and will never be allowed to do this, but if I could, I would make it so everybody gets paid the same. Everybody gets to provide their level of labor to the workforce. Everybody has a comfort of living that they appreciate. And then those who are not able-bodied to work, we make sure that they're still taken care of. And in an ideal world, everybody gets to pursue the thing that they love. And if it, or even further,
according to his need, from each according to his ability.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my personal ideal. I'm a socialist. Like, I'm at my core. And it's so crazy because, like, I'll tell somebody on the left, like, hey, I'm a socialist, we're on the same side. And they're like, fuck you. And I'm like, what do you mean? I literally want to redistribute the wealth. Like, I literally want to, like, bankrupt Jeff Bezos and redistribute his money. But no, it's like, no, because you're compromising on minimum wage, or you're compromising on something, or there's this idea of, like, I second guess. I challenge things. I just challenge them. Like, hey, do you actually, like, know what you're talking about right now? Can we talk in more depth on this? If I made a Facebook post, maybe we shouldn't cancel Mulberry Street. I'll get micro hung, and it's like, shit, I want to redistribute the wealth, but it doesn't. It's interesting because it's, like, not about that anymore. It's about, like, the extreme social dynamics of things, and it's like, it's so weird because I think I am the person that gets off the screen and does something. Like, I donate to progressives. Like,
yeah, I would say that.
Like, I donate, like, decent money to political candidates that are highly progressive. Like, and I try to get involved. I built my life in a career of policy, not because I'm a some psycho, like, political goon, but, like, I actually want to make a difference. I'm not reading Politico because I'm a political junkie. I actually want to make a difference. And it's so interesting because the second I crossed that threshold, I started getting people that, like, when I started bringing the compromise issue to the forefront, like, hey, well, I want $15 minimum wage, but we can pass $10 minimum wage in Congress. You know what? I started to get called a political insider. And it's like, all I did was intern on the Hill, and I spoke to Congress, which is pretty dope, but I was an intern. Like, I'm not a political insider. But all of a sudden, because I believe in compromise, like, well, now I'm not part of the fun squad anymore. And it's just it's mind-boggling, and I have to assume that that's how people on the right feel with the QAnon thing.
That could be. I think that's slightly different. That's more culty, right? And I have been tempted so many times to say the left is a cult. I don't think it is. I think it has a lot of similar problems, but it's not a cult. QAnon's kind of a cult.
Yeah, it's pretty much a cult. Well, I mean, I guess more the populist. Screw QAnon. The populist version of Republicans right now.
It happens a little bit when you say, screw Trump and stuff like that. But, from, like, all of my heroes, like, you're not going to believe this, Chris, but, like, not all of my heroes. Most of my heroes started out on the left. Dave Rubin was on the Young Turks 5 years ago. Jordan Peterson was in the Socialist Party in Canada. He is and remains on the left. One of my favorite evolutionary biologists is Brett Weinstein, who is a progressive, right? Yeah. So I don't know if you actually know this, but the right actually is not in the business of infighting. We don't have a Puritan ethic.
You're not.
What's that?
You're not the atypical representation of the right.
I'm telling you, we do not have cancel culture on the right.
Yeah.
It just
I didn't attend the meeting that you did on Wednesday, but
what's that?
I said I didn't attend the right meeting that you did on Wednesday, but my understanding and the way I look at it is that there is no this is how 50% of people are, and this is how 50% of people are. It's a broad spectrum. It's a broad spectrum across where the majority of people lump into these groups, and it kind of goes out on a curve from there.
Yeah, but now we're getting into look. There's temperamental differences between conservatives and progressives, right? There are temperamental differences, and there are cultural differences now, right? So it's saying that there are differences is A, eminently true, and B, you're kind of just disagreeing with the extent of it.
I'm
telling you,
I'm neither, and I exist.
Again, the heroes of the right are people many of them who just came over from the left. Like many of them.
Right. That's
Peterson
the
is
point I'm
one
making. Your heroes don't represent the heroes of the right. They represent your heroes.
Yeah, look, I'm not. I never claim to speak for. I try not to speak for all of conservatives, but there is a very large appetite for Jordan Peterson on the right. There is a very large appetite for Brett Weinstein on the right. There is an appetite for ideas all across the aisle, broadly speaking, on the right. We do not actually cancel people. And if you look at the insults levied from right against left, right? So the people who throw insults, it's actually usually about their intelligence, right? It's libtard, it's Democrat, it's whatever it is, right? It's usually about the intelligence. It's not about their morality, right? So we actually don't do that kind of canceling, right? We just think they're wrong, right? So there's a saying out there that Democrats or that the Republicans think Democrats are wrong, and Democrats think that Republicans are evil, right? And that actually is playing out. I know you don't think there's differences between left and right, but I see that a lot all the time.
So
and maybe
the
I'm
right,
biased.
the right doesn't think that the left is evil.
No. We think you're misguided.
Does the right detest the left?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying there's not problems, but we know that the left thinks they're trying to do the right thing. The vast majority of us. Again, as a cultural movement, conservatives that I'm aware of think that the left is well-intentioned but misguided, right? That's actually something that we struggle with a lot because it's hard to fight against people who you know are trying to do the right thing but you think are wrong, right? But we don't get that. And Chris, I think you can probably back me up on that. We absolutely do not get that benefit on the left, right? Republicans are evil, right? To a lot of people on the left.
I agree. I think cancel culture is more often associated with the left. Like we're definitely more. That's more of the sins of the left, but the right has. I'm not even doing whataboutism. You guys got plenty of shit, but that is one of the sins of the left. But
wait, no, you can do whataboutism. The right did it back in the '90s a lot.
Sure. There's plenty of stuff I can call up, but no, we'll keep it isolated. Like it is the. Cancel culture is definitely like pop culture. Cancel culture is more on the left. The right just cancels voting rights. But
stop it.
Yeah, no, but I will say that you might be looking at some rose-colored glasses when you mention that like Republicans are evil, and I would say in the moderate sense, like if we look at the spectrum, if we're right at the center of a straight horizontal line, right? For those on the immediate left and those on the immediate right, I would say yes. Those on the moderate right Republicans are the ones that are not going to be like, look at those demonic Democrats. But the Democrats would be like, oh, Republicans. But once you get further to the sides, I think it equals out. Like there's plenty of once you hit like Newt Gingrich, Chuck Grassley, Ted Cruz level supporting Republicans, Trump Republicans, they start. I do start seeing some quite explicit disfavor towards Democrats, just for being a Democrat. Like they don't listen to you. They're just like, oh, you're a fucking Democrat. So
again, I'm just gonna say, like, there's a difference between you're a fucking Democrat and you're like you're dumb and you're evil, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I get. That's what I get. That's what I. Yeah.
One of the news stories that I was going to pull up earlier that we didn't get time to pull up kind of falls in line with this. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to throw it up real quick. You can read the headline.
We can run over a little bit. We started a couple of minutes late,
So this one I thought would be an interesting one to talk about. But in a speech in Congress, one of the Republican congressmen, now the headline again takes it a little bit more extreme. He was quoting a line from the Bible. a couple lines from the Bible, but he's basically saying, and in his own way, I think, trying to, if you want to say cancel. I mean, cancel is the thing that the left does, but the left also is the one that's in power over most of the, media, the social media and major media, Hollywood type things like that. So they can cancel, right? But it's not that the left, not for the fact that the right doesn't also have things they want to cancel,
right?
In the extreme right. And so to me, this is an example, right? Like, I mean, this particular congressman who represents enough constituents that he got into office, right?
Yeah.
Is bringing up how God detests LGBTQ, thinks that people, like, I mean, the line he used literally is, men shouldn't wear women's clothes and women shouldn't wear men's clothes, talking about this in Congress. And to me, that's the other side, the right, doing his version of canceling, of not accepting somebody else because of who they are or choice they made.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, number one, that guy's an idiot, but I'm not going to pretend that he's not on my side, right? So that's my cross to bear right there. I wanted to bring this up, and maybe this can be the last thing that we end on. I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, what is the difference between right canceling and left canceling? And it's not this is, I don't think this is certainly not a partisan attack either way. I was thinking about this, and let's see if you guys agree with it. I think the difference between right canceling and the left canceling is that the right, back in the day, they were like canceling Eminem, they were canceling Limp Bizkit, they were canceling new cultural trends, right? They were trying to prevent change. They were trying to prevent profanity and preserve the kids and that kind of stuff. Like prevent new stuff from coming out, right? They were literally doing their job and opposing progressives, but they were being tyrannical about it. And you see what the progressives are canceling, and we just talked about it quite a bit. The progressives are canceling old things. They're canceling old ideas, right? Dr. Seuss from the 50s. They're canceling, things. They're canceling our founding fathers. They're canceling whatever it is. Like, it seems to be old stuff, and there is some new too, now that I'm thinking about it. Like, the trans rights stuff is a new issue and people are being canceled over it. But I don't know, you think the theory fits or no?
It does. I didn't notice that. It's definitely a pattern at the least.
What do you think,
WAP. Like, you guys hate WAP.
I think similar to stereotypes, generally there's some truth to it, right? Like, and it makes sense. The left is generally ideologically pushing for progressive thoughts and approaches, and the right is generally pushing for conservative ideological approaches. So the things they don't believe in are what they're going to be canceling, right? And so it kind of makes sense that it would tend that way, for sure. So I think makes sense, but I don't think it's 100%.
Well, I think on that, we had a couple minutes technically because we started a little late, but I think that's going to be up for tonight. I had a great time. I had a great conversation, guys. So, thanks, Denny, for watching again, and it's been a blast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.